So about a week ago, fellow Dying Light YouTuber Onizombies came up with the idea of a Dying Light YouTuber collaboration project, and he asked us all if we'd like to get involved. The plan was for us to each make a video comparing different aspects of the early 2019 Dying Light 2 footage with the more recent 2021 stuff, and then to put them all together and to make a complete comparison playlist before the launch of the game in February. The link to that playlist, by the way, is in the description below, and you should definitely check out what the other guys have done to contribute to this collaboration. I chose to make a video comparing the environment and the infected, so basically features around the city that were in the 2019 trailers and how they've changed in the 2 years since. I also chose the infected as back in them days we hadn't really seen any monsters and the infected were kind of in the background really. The focus back then seemed to be more on the people and their factions. But don't worry, there was still plenty of footage from back then to compare to the modern stuff, and it is pretty interesting stuff. I must also point out though that this will not be a criticism of the latest build, but simply a look at where they've improved on what we saw back then, and also what they had to cut back on in order to complete the game. So first off, I decided to focus on a structure that has appeared heavily in the original trailers and also the latest ones, and one that would provide a good view of the surrounding area of the city. That structure is of course the water tower, and straight away you can see that the old version is very different in its design compared to the finished version. It looks to be much larger and more elaborate than the first one, especially when you compare the view from the ground up. The interior of the tower though seems to be the opposite, as the original design looks far more elaborate and, dare I say, more realistic than the new one, especially with the running water effects there. The climbing mechanics are of course still very similar, but they do highlight just how much they've had to scale back this original design. It's actually quite a shame, to be honest. The top floor of the tower has changed quite a bit as well, and whereas the original was kind of ruined and had a massive hole in the wall, the new one is much cleaner looking and more like a newer build. That hole in the wall does give us an opportunity though to have a look at the view, so we can see what of the surrounding area has remained in the game to this day. Well, on the right there is a cathedral, and you can still see that from the water tower, and it's in roughly the same location, although you can see that the design has been scaled back a bit when it comes to the amount of spires it has. The cathedral, of course, is where the survivors are based, and the latest version again looks much newer than perhaps it should in this world. The next feature is this massive arch structure that appeared to be a central image in the 2019 trailer footage, to be honest. So you'd think that that would have remained in the game, right? Well, actually no. Now there's no sign of it, and even when viewed from all angles, it seems that not only has the arch been removed, but the surrounding area also looks very different in density of buildings and height of rooftops. And another major feature in the background of the original footage, when we were looking through the binoculars, was the Peacekeeper's Citadel. And again, if you scan the horizon of this footage, it's nowhere to be seen. Here's another angle, and again, not there. Looking in the completely opposite direction from the roof of the tower, all you can see is the huge VNC tower in the central loop, so I think it's pretty conclusive that the Citadel never made it into the final build. One last observation of the tower before we move on is how it looks when assigned to the Peacekeepers. It definitely looks more like it was built with limited resources when compared to the impressive looking version of the 2021 footage. So there seems to be a trend here in that this apocalyptic world seems to be far less run down now than was originally intended. Now, moving on to the next location that we've seen in both the 2019 and 2021 footage, and that's the Fish Eye Bar in the central loop. Now, it's not easy to find features that have remained in the game here, but one that stood out to me was when Aiden looks over the edge of the building with Juan and sees where the meeting with the Renegades is about to take place. Now, if you focus on this distinct roof outline near the entrance there, just to the right, and now take a look at the latest gameplay footage, you'll see that this feature is actually still there, but is probably the only feature that's still recognisable now, to be honest, because from where we were looking over in the original, that would put us about here, and it certainly looks nothing like it did before. Again, it seems so much more elaborate than the original design too, so I don't know. After paragliding down onto the building in the latest footage, you catch a brief glimpse of the surrounding buildings, and although you can see some similarity between these two images, you really wouldn't know that they were the same place at first glance. And when looking at the city in the old footage and then back to the latest, it has to be said that whereas the final old Villador map looks to have been scaled back in building density, it seems as though that was because they wanted to make a much more detailed and complex central loop area. So remember the 2019 footage where Aiden had to catch the truck after Frank gets shot? Well, I thought I'd just compare the binoculars animation quickly. The cracks on the lenses are in exactly the same parts here, except that on the newer footage you can see a slightly more realistic chip in the glass here. You know, not very significant, but I just thought I'd point it out. Of course, the truck that we were looking at through the binoculars was on its way to the Renegades Island. And that was quite heavily featured in the old footage, and I'm pleased to say that it seems to have remained in the latest build. But we don't really have a great deal of footage of what it looks like now, and the only decent images to compare are that of the front gate and the tower structure to the left of it. And although the design has changed to a degree, it still has that made out of scrap look that, really the whole city was intended to look like. So I guess that they're trying to make it look like the Renegades are the less skilled, more barbaric and kind of simple faction. A couple of final features that have remained in the game are this graffiti of the screams within a scream, so somebody clearly wanted that to stay in. Also, the rope lifts have been kept in, but of course they've been updated a bit. I can't help but notice though how new the rope looks, and I feel that surely nothing would still be in that condition after all this time in the supposed new Dark Ages. Well, what can you do? Okay, let's move on to the infected then, and as I mentioned earlier, the infected in the 2019 footage made them seem to just blend into the environment as they really didn't stand out against the backdrop of the city. This animation of one staggering frenetically towards you with locked out joints was pretty creepy, to be honest, and when you look at the newer ones, their movements are much more fluid and kind of human-like. I have to say I prefer this early idea for its effect alone, it was a bit more scary. This old 2019 viral scene though does look very similar to the more recent versions, especially their UV light reaction. It's in fact identical when you see them one after the other. This leap in viral though may have been replaced with the new Banshee variant, as she's the only one that I've seen do this in the latest gameplay. Another weird thing though is the 2019 footage has a huge difference in detail between the faces of the normal infected and this leaping viral. The leaping viral's face looks awesome and pretty realistic, and then in the same scene you see that these guys look really bad. I guess with the latest infected versions, they've found a kind of trade-off between the two when it comes to the quality of the detail, and although they look less realistic than the old leaping viral, they are a big improvement over the basic infected types in the original. And the most striking comparison I could find between the old one and the new one is by comparing these clips of Aiden using one to break his fall. It's very, very different. In the cold light of day, you can see just how poorly rendered the 2019 infected were, and although the 2021 versions still seem to have a kind of cartoonish quality to them, they are so much better than these original ones. So, having gone through these clips and discovering what has remained in the game and what has been lost, I'd definitely be very interested in having a proper look around in the Dying Light 2 maps when we finally get our hands on it on February the 4th, 2022. And I will most certainly be making a more in-depth video on the subject once I've spent some more time exploring the final build of Old Villador and the Central Loop. Okay, that's it for this video. Thanks again to Onizombies for coming to me with this collaboration idea, and hopefully we can all work together on some stuff again in the future. Don't forget to check out the collaboration playlist that I've linked in the description, and if you enjoyed this video then please leave a like and subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.